I'm John Travis in Mullumbimby, New South Wales, Australia, on the 2nd of April in 2025, talking to Bob Fellows in Minnetonka, Minnesota, and where it is April Fool's Day. So this is for real, Bob. We've known each other, what, 30, 40 years? Recently,
I first I first came to the National Wellness Conference in 1983
that's probably,
or 84.
yeah.
How about you?
I was there actually in 78, and then back and forth. So we would have met in one of the early 80s. I wasn't
Hmm.
there every year in the 80s, but most of them. So, well, I've been delighted to track you down. We had like a 10-year gap where we lost track of each other. You moved to that wonderful place in New Hampshire in the summers that we visited last summer and reconnected. And so, I want to start out by finding out what your birth circumstances and early childhood were like, since they shape who you are and why, and we'll get to that question eventually or not. Um, so, where were you born and when, and to whom, and with who else around you?
Well, I was born in Manchester, New Hampshire, and my parents had both lived in New Hampshire for a very long time. Uh, and my father had just come back from 5 years of service in World War II, got married in 1947. I was born in 1949.
5 years he was in the army. Wow.
Yeah. He retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force.
Oh,
That probably had an influence on my upbringing.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Did he ever take you flying?
No, he wasn't a pilot.
Oh,
He was commander of a base in England that all the planes came in and out of.
uh-huh. And were
And
you
he did a military government as well. He went into cities after they had been taken by the Allies and became the mayor of the city, even including Germany.
Wow. How many mayoralities did he have?
I don't know.
A lot. I didn't know any of that. And were
And he
you
set
the
up
oldest?
refugee camps with people from, oh, maybe 10 different nationalities. Yeah, it was a very interesting career.
Was this all before he met your mother and married her, or was she in the
That's
background?
correct. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He came back, decided to go into banking. In his life, he worked his way up from teller to president.
Wow.
And he married the daughter of another banker and kept it
Keep
all in the family, a
keep it
banking family.
family. And then what was that? Was before you were born a few years or?
Yeah, just 2 years. And I was the oldest, and I have a sister who's 2 years younger and a brother who's 5 years younger than I am.
Exactly my same family pattern. Wow.
So I'm the eldest, and that makes a difference.
Yep. Tell me about it. The experimental child.
Yeah, a lot to live up to, and uh, a feeling that I may have uh, been privileged in a way, because for a while you're an only child, so
Hmm. And
you're a
then
little more
the usurpers come in and take over.
right.
There's actually a whole book written about 2.5 years is the worst possible time to have a sibling born. And
Oh, wow.
it's actually, and it was the common thing. All my friends, same pattern, like 2.5 years seemed to be the staging.
Hmm.
So, what were the earliest memories that you have?
Skiing. My parents loved to downhill ski, and every Christmas, or not every Christmas, but if we needed new skis, we knew what those long presents were next to the tree, and we'd all go skiing on the weekends. That was a common interest that my parents had. Um, Other early memories, um, I became interested in magic at a very young age. I checked a book out of the oldest public library in Peterborough, New Hampshire, the oldest one in the country. Um, and I have that book. I went back in my 20s and the book was still there with my name
Ah.
written in the back. And it was 1958, and I was 8 years old, and I started reading about the great magicians. Then I saw a magician in Manchester named Ace Gorham, and he had been an actor in Hollywood, a very distinguished man, did a wonderful magic show. And I thought he might have answers to really deep questions, and then when I asked him about his magic, I ended up learning tricks. And I think I was looking for some kind of real magic, but I wasn't disappointed. I just kept learning more tricks and started performing. Um, I'm told by a friend, I do not remember this, but I'm told that when I was very young, I would conduct church services. I would, like have a little service. I was interested in being a minister at a very young age and a magician. And I enjoyed my chemistry set. So I was looking for answers to deep questions, and I didn't care whether the answer came in the form of magic, science, or religion. My favorite page of the manual for the Gilbert chemistry set was the alchemist, the person who was all things, who
Mm.
would turn turn base metal to gold and read the stars. And I was just interested in the meaning of life, which was not completely foreign to my father, the banker. I mean, I saw him as being a numbers guy, but um, an early memory, very early, I might have been 4 or 5 years old. We would go to the beach, and he asked me how many grains of sand I thought there were. And interesting, I just realized it's a number question, but it's designed, it was designed to make me go, whoa, I have no idea. It must be infinite. And he was satisfied when he saw that. And then he had me look up at the stars and he said, how many stars do you think there are? And where's the furthest one? And he just watched me. I mean, I remember that the conversation was over when there was a look of wonder in my eyes, when I just went, whoa. Then he taught me the binary system in the hard sand with his finger.
Really?
Yeah. And so it was this mix of logic and rational thought, but also a sense of wonder. So I think my father was somewhat of a mystic. Um,
Sounds like it. Yeah.
I didn't feel that way at the time because, as a kid, I just knew that he was at the bank sitting at a desk. And I didn't realize that he was, in a sense, a pastor because he was the type of old style banker who would make loans to businesses and then go out and visit the business and help them be successful so they could pay back the loan.
Mhm.
So he had kind of a pastoral visitation side to his work that I didn't see. I just saw him, crunching numbers at a desk, but he had that pastoral side. My mother um, had interests that I think fed into my makeup because I remember she had an album, an LP album of self hypnosis. She sort of hid it, but we knew it was there, and she would listen to it to improve her mind. And she read Christian Science literature, and to calm us, she would read to us from Christian Science. So I had all these influences that weren't really registering because, I just figured, well, all families do these things, listen to self-hypnosis records and read from Christian Science and look at the stars. And I define my parents simply as a Air Force officer. He was in the reserves for 15 years when he came back. So I would see him put on his uniform and go away for a weekend or whatever. And a banker, and my mother as a homemaker. You know, she was at home taking care of the kids, running a daycare sometimes in the basement. Um, and so if I were asked to define them, I would say banker and homemaker. You know, I was missing a whole lot of influence that I was getting unconsciously. Uh, so there's a start on early upbringing.
Yeah. And just a note for younger viewers that shows our age. LP stands for long playing, and these are vinyl records at 33 and a third RPM, and they
Yeah,
call them albums.
actually, they're back.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
back. Yeah.
it's amazing. Full circle. So I can really see the influences for both of your professions. They're very early. And what are your earliest memories with your siblings, and what was that relationship like?
Um, I got along with them well, and I still get along with them well. We're still very close. Um, let's see. Maybe they would say that because there were two boys on either side, that the girl in the middle got picked on a little bit.
Hmm.
Maybe they would say that since my brother was quite a bit younger, he got picked on a little bit. Maybe they would say that since I seemed to get more than they did because I was the oldest, that I was resented a little bit, but it was all very normal. I mean, it was, you would expect that.
Yeah, certainly true in my case too. Yeah. And what was school like for you?
My favorite teacher was my first grade teacher. Her name was Miss Parent. This was in Peterborough, New Hampshire. And she looked just like the Beavers teacher on Leave It to Beaver.
Ah,
And I realized that when we watched Leave It to Beaver, boys my age identified with Wally, the older brother. Was that his name?
I never watched it. I missed that.
But in fact, we were the exact same age as the beaver, but we didn't identify with the beaver because he seemed so young. But we
Oh,
thought we were the cool older brother. But in fact, I was tracking with the beaver, the exact same age. And I had a first grade teacher that looked like his, named Miss Parent, and I had a crush on her just like Beaver had a crush on his teacher. Um, so we looked like the perfect family in some ways. Um, I think part of my interest in magic came from uh, wanting to show people that the world isn't exactly as it appears to be. A lot of magicians say they became interested in magic when they were young to get attention. I really don't think that was the case with me. I think that I loved showing people a box and saying, I have here an empty box. While I was looking at something in a secret compartment, I could see it and saying to them, I have an empty box, and then pulling something out of it and having them go, whoa. And my whole life, I've wanted to show people that, hey, these things that politicians are saying may not be may not be true.
really?
Wake up, folks. Wake up. You know, magic is a way of waking up and challenging our assumptions. And I became interested in this family that looked like the Leave It to Beaver family, where of course we knew that you know everything isn't perfect. It doesn't look like Sunday morning in church every minute of that of you know every minute and I just enjoyed showing people that maybe some of what we accepted as fact was really illusion, even at a young age.
Hmm. It's interesting. I was a few years older, and we grew up with Ozzie and Harriet on the radio, and Father Knows Best with an alcoholic actor. Uh,
Oh,
all
yeah.
the dysfunctionality of these models that I thought we should be like that weren't. So
Hmm.
the disillusionment from early on. So how did you do in school? Were you um,
I did well, all the way up through eighth grade, straight A's. I think I got a B in history in eighth grade. It was really top of the class. Um, but I was in small schools. When we moved to Exeter, New Hampshire, I had the opportunity to attend Phillips Exeter Academy as a townie. And uh, and that is distinguished me from my brother and sister because when we moved away from Exeter, they didn't get to go to a prep school. I only went because it was much less expensive if you didn't. The big cost was room and board.
mhm.
I wanted to reduce the tuition for local boys. It was all male at the time for good town gown relations. And one of my classmates was the son of the dean of the academy. And in eighth grade, he said, "Are you going to apply to the academy?" And I said, "Well, I guess so." So now I get into Phillips Exeter. I didn't get A's anymore. Um, I got that sort of like gentleman C plus the whole way through. And uh, I found out later that they grade on a curve and um, very tough grading system back then. It's not like that now. But yeah, sure. I mean, my one thing I love to talk about is that here I come from, eighth grade in a small public school in New Hampshire, and I'm in lab science one lab, and I get this guy as a lab partner, and I'm sitting there saying, "Wow, how does he get all this?" Well, his father was a doctor. He became a noted heart surgeon, and I'm just sitting there saying, what the heck is going on with this guy? He's getting it all. And I'm completely confused. And then, uh, so I say, okay, well, how about if I try writing for the newspaper at the Academy? Uh, so I go over there and they're all set for writers. Thank you very much. In fact, the news editor became the president of Time Magazine. Well, how about let's act in a play? Maybe I'll go act in a play. Well, one of my classmates became gopher on the Love Boat and a and a and a congressman. So, okay, I guess I'm not going to get a part in the play. I mean, every place I went at Phillips Exeter, forget athletics. I didn't even mention athletics. So, uh, it had a big effect on me, and I try really hard. Ever since then, I try really hard. Um, I'm not, I don't have the feeling that, oh, I'm going to be successful. This won't be a problem. I'm really trying. And as a result, sometimes I'm successful, but it comes from trying to catch up with the other students with that kind of rude awakening that I had in ninth grade. And
And
I even remember thinking, I wonder if I'll ever be able to get a job. I mean, because I thought now students were coming from other parts of the country, and I must just be going to a really slow school in this in this town in New Hampshire. Uh, Now that students are coming from all over the country, I realize, oh my gosh, the whole country is ahead of me. I don't know if I'm even going to be able to get a job. We didn't have a sense that, they they were all top students from around the country. It was just a
you
whole
wouldn't
lot of
know that,
guys
yeah.
didn't know that. Yeah.
And were you there all 4 years then?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
graduated and then what?
Um, I didn't have the grades to go straight to Harvard or Yale or Princeton, which was the ideal. But the man who had been director of admissions at Phillips Exeter went on to become director of admissions at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. And he knew that we had what it takes, so he came back and recruited 8 of us to go to Lawrence.
Mm.
He just said, "Hey, I'd like to meet with a bunch of you." And in the interview, he said, "Would you like to go to Lawrence? It's a great school." I said, "I think I would." He said, "Okay, you're in," because he knew that these guys from Exeter were going to do well at Lawrence. And that's exactly what happened. I went to Lawrence, and now when I tried to do some things like news edit, write for the newspaper, broadcast on the radio station. Now, right away, first year, will you be the news editor? Will you be the operations manager of the radio station? Getting parts in place. I mean, it was like the door was wide open because I had the preparation in the background. I didn't realize it, but I did. So that was a different kind of awakening. Wow, maybe you can do some things.
Hmm.
And Lawrence University was a great school.
Yeah, I've heard great things about it. Uh, Now, were you still doing magic through Exeter and at this point, or what's happened with your magic career?
I performed magic from the age of 9 to 13. And I even performed on a Saturday morning TV kiddie show in Manchester and performed for money. When I was 12, I had an hour-long show that I could charge money for.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was pretty serious. Ace Gorham and all those people helped me out. Anyway, I stopped doing it when I was 13 and went to the academy because, you're doing things with silk handkerchiefs and doves, and it didn't seem that cool then. It was before Doug Henning or David Copperfield or any of those people. It didn't seem real cool. So I dropped magic and took up guitar and drums and played in a rock group, and
Hmm.
still wanted to be on stage, but now I'm a musician, a kind of a musician, a blues drummer and guitarist.
At Exeter?
Yeah, I started doing it there, and
Uh-huh.
I ended up in a blues group called the Soul Survivors, SOUL,
Ah.
and we performed at at Newell's Casino up in northern New Hampshire, same place where Aerosmith got started,
Hmm.
and I was their lead guitarist for a summer, and that was again eye-opening. I didn't pick up magic again until I went to Harvard Divinity School out of Lawrence, um, and I needed a way to help earn my way through.
Mm.
And I went into Harvard Student Employment Office, and this is about 1971, 72. And in the Harvard Student Employment Office, they had cards in like a card file of different jobs, and people could fill out a card and put your name in for different types of jobs. And I remember exactly the prices. You could, put on a red vest and go help cater parties for $2.50 an hour, you know. But I looked at one category, and there was a guy in there who was a magician, and he would do a magic show for $25. Well, $25 is a lot more than $2.50 for an
Yeah.
hour. So I said, I'm just going to see what happens. I hadn't done a magic show or seen a magic show. Magic wasn't popular. I hadn't seen a magic show since I was 13. So here I am, 21, 22. I fill out a card and I list my TV credits from when I was 12. You know, I make myself sound like quite an experienced magician. And I immediately got a call from a Jewish summer camp asking me to do um, a whole week of shows. I think maybe 4 shows, they were going to pay me $80. I reduced my price from 25 to 20 because it was 4 shows in a row. I hadn't seen a magic show, but I accepted the job. I've accepted a lot of jobs without knowing what I was going to do yet. And I literally called the other magician and said, look, I got this job doing 4 shows, but I'd like you to do the first show because I haven't seen a magic show in a long time. And he was very friendly and agreed. And I paid him the 25 out of my 80. I drove to my parents' house in Connecticut and got the chest of tricks from when I was 12. I went into the local magic shop in downtown Boston and asked what was going on in magic, and nothing had changed. So I was fine. And I went and I watched this magician, and he performed in a tuxedo, very much similar to what I would have done when I was 12. But I decided to wear jeans and look more like, hip and have more humor. Well, that was just before Doug Henning came out with the magic show on Broadway, the same persona. So magic just took off, and my magic career just took off in Boston, and I was doing magic all the time. I built one large illusion, and that made my show big. And I started working for agents and county fairs, state fairs. I mean, it just took right off. So I decided to see how far I could go with that before I continued with the divinity school career. Um,
Oh,
I
so you
did work.
dropped out of school for a period?
No, I got the master's degree, but I didn't get ordained as a minister. I did work as a youth director for a couple of years while I was in school, field work. But I couldn't resist going into magic because it was so popular. In 1974, the magic show on Broadway, I met Doug Henning, um, his TV specials. And here I was already in Boston doing something very similar. So I couldn't resist it. And I said, I'm just going to keep doing magic until I figure out what I really want to do.
Fascinating. We jumped ahead. I'm curious, anything more with Lawrence? Like, what was your major? And let's go back there for a few
I
minutes.
majored in philosophy, and John Dreher and Bill Boardman were my professors, and they were quite a strong influence on me. Of course, they were both, um, atheists. I mean, they were logical positivists, and I was being trained in that way of thinking. But I still had such a strong interest in the mystical that I had to go to Harvard Divinity School and explore more deeply. Also, at Lawrence, I met someone who knew about Swami Satchidananda in New York, who was an Indian guru, the one who opened the Woodstock Music Festival.
Hmm.
And I went to New York on a break and went to the Integral Yoga Institute and became very interested in yoga. Of course, it was a big thing in 1969. And I became certified by the Swami to be a yoga teacher. So that is the wellness component.
Wow.
And there was a point when I was at Harvard Divinity School, working as a youth minister on the weekends, teaching up to 6 yoga classes throughout the week in suburbs, to mostly housewives, and in a church in Boston to Kitty Dukakis and all sorts of, psychiatrists who brought their patients to the yoga class because it was early. It was early. I was one of the few yoga teachers in Boston. And I was 19, and I was being asked a lot of deep questions by serious people. And I didn't want to say, well, hey, look, I'm only 19. I don't know anything. So I just tried to answer the best I could. I gave people common sense advice, and they received it gratefully because I was a disciple of the Swami, so I must know something. So there was a point where I was taking classes at the Divinity School, teaching yoga, and working as a magician, including in a nightclub that had exotic dancers as well. And
Wow.
that was the big thing in Boston. Vaudeville was on the way out, and exotic dancing was coming into the same clubs. And there was a period where they blended. And Jay Leno tells the same story. That's how you got started in variety arts in Boston. So I would do my act, and then I say, now the sensational Samantha, and then I would go in the green room and wait, and then I'd come out and do my act again, and now the beautiful Blaze, and go and wait to do my act again. And literally, I wanted to learn escape artistry, so there was another magician who would tie me up in the basement in between my shows, and I had to get out in time for my next act. I mean, it was crazy sort of carnival existence. Well, at one point, the club was going to put my name up on the marquee outside, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, who would be worse to see my name up on the marquee at this club? Would it be, the mom of a youth at the church in Haverhill? Would it be someone in my yoga class? I mean, who do I not want to see this? And I couldn't tell a party from one portion of my life about the other portions of my life. I mean, I kept them very separate. I'm a youth minister. I'm a Harvard student. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a magician. I'm a nightclub magician. But it was funny that I was in just as much trouble talking about being a Harvard student in the nightclub as I would be talking about being a nightclub entertainer at the church. Because when it came out, that I was a student working on a master's at Harvard, working in this real dive. I mean, this is a real dive. But, it was money and it was a chance to perform and it was fun. One of the dancers said, "Are you writing a book about us?" Now, with a great delay, who knows, I may, but
Was this in the combat zone?
I didn't work in the combat zone. I worked at the Echo Lounge in Brighton.
Oh, in Brighton. Okay, because my med school dorm was next to the combat zone. I used to walk through
Right.
there before they moved it out. So
So
now,
the culture, we'll call
yeah.
it.
Now I'm curious if you were 19 at Harvard, did you enter school early, like at Lawrence? I would have thought you
No,
just.
I was 19 when I got into yoga. I was at Lawrence when I was certified as a yoga teacher.
Oh, okay, so that came earlier, and that was through Satchidananda who you met.
And that's part of why I went to Harvard Divinity School.
Uh-huh.
This is one of my uh, most seminal stories. Uh, I got so deeply into yoga that I had a one-on-one meeting with the Swami once, and I said, "I'm ready to go to India. Do you have a place where I can go to do this full time? Do you have a place where I can go and donate my services? I'm ready to go to India." And I think he looked at a 19-year-old son of a banker and a homemaker and student and wasn't going to take advantage of it. What he said was, two men met. One had a black and white picture of his church, and the other had a color picture of his temple. The man with the black and white picture of the church said, "I should really switch and start going to your temple. It's much more beautiful." And the man with the color picture of the temple said, "You don't need to change churches. You just need to change the film in your own camera." So I left thinking that the Swami had told me to look back at Christianity, to look back at my roots. My parents were members of the church in the center of town, and to take more seriously these courses that I was taking in divinity school on Western religion, and to not succumb to the attraction of India. And I then went into the ministry. Actually, the meeting with him was before I went to Harvard Divinity School, so I decided to go to divinity school based on that little parable that he told me.
Fascinating. Wow. So, any other things from Lawrence that we should know about? That would be a pretty formative period for you, besides what we've already heard.
It was a really, really good school. I mean, the opportunities were tremendous. I was able to do a semester abroad in Paris in 1969. Um, the year after, there had been so much upheaval and protests in Paris to the Vietnam War. I would go to the same cafe as Jean-Paul Sartre, sit at a nearby table. Just the influence of a semester in Paris was tremendous, and that was thanks to Lawrence. I did an independent study on the films of Jean-Luc Godard, and wrote a paper on his methods and techniques as a cinematographer, and had it reviewed by someone who knew him personally. My professor knew someone who knew Godard, and it was just a real high. It's why I didn't go to the Woodstock Music Festival, because
In Paris.
I had just come back from Paris, right? So that's due to Lawrence. I mean, Lawrence gave me that opportunity. Other students were interesting. It was a guy named Ted Tollefson who eventually became a Unitarian minister. And he handed me a book, In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Uspensky, about George Gurdjieff. And I read through that. I poured through that and, poured over that, and just it had quite an influence on me. And, he continued to turn me on to different mystical beliefs. And then years later, when I decided to become ordained, I went to United Theological Seminary and was able to take a course in Taoism from Ted Tollefson.
Ah,
Now we're in our 50s, who I met at Lawrence.
amazing. Any girlfriends at Lawrence? Any relationships
You must
started?
have ESP, because I was just going to mention the girlfriend experience. I had gone to an all-boys school, and I was intimidated by having girls in class. It was just distracting. Plus, it was the Midwest, and there were all these Midwestern blondes, the archetypal cheerleader type. Well, I had my eyes on this one girl named Tina. When I was a sophomore, she came in as a freshman. And I tried to figure out how to meet her. So I'm working for the newspaper, and I'm the photographer for the newspaper, and she wanted to be a reporter for the newspaper. So I got the news editor to put us on an assignment together. I still have the picture that I took of her in her very short skirt, the look, the mini skirt look,
Mini skirts, yeah.
with a hairbrush in her hand, visible, the hairbrush, and her book.
You just froze. I think we've got a freeze here. Are you back?
Yeah,
I lost you there.
I'm back.
We were with
So
the hairbrush. I lost you on the hairbrush. Good idea.
I have the picture of her looking like the pretty girl. So we did the story together, and we talked and eventually dated, but she had been taken out by most of the members of the football team. She came as a freshman. Everyone on the football team wanted to date her. And I was very different from a football player. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. So she was very interested in, philosophy, yoga, not much interested in the football culture, but she was just very pretty, So I'll never forget that she said, I've gone out with all these football players and they're all the same. First date, hand up the blouse. And that sort of characterized what she was up against as a beautiful girl at a Midwestern college. And so I just treated her like a friend. you know, one of the girls, one of the guys, whatever. We were friends. Um, and she said to me, I hate to ask this, you probably don't want to do this, but I'm a homecoming queen candidate and I have to go out on the field and would you be my escort?
Mm.
So I'm skinny with a goatee and mustache like you have now. And um, I'm wearing a black turtleneck and a corduroy sport coat and jeans.
Sound like a
And
beatnik.
I was a beatnik. And all the other escorts were football players in like, you know, Sears and Roebuck suit and tie, very traditional. Um, and um, and I'm this like Maynard G. Krebs guy on the end. Well, they introduced each person and they started at the other end, and I was at one end, and they introduced the homecoming queen candidate, escorted by, you know, quarterback Dale Smith, right? Next homecoming queen candidate, escorted by. And so I'm standing there and they introduced Tina and I'm waiting to be introduced to step forward and they never say my name. They never introduced me. See, in my mind, they were introducing the escorts. I was the only one who wasn't a football player. They were introducing the football players in their mind. So Tina's parents are out there with a old fashioned movie camera like Super 8, you know, and
Uh-huh.
everyone's standing forward except me. And after he says, how come they didn't introduce Bob? You know, uh, so it it created a, I mean, it created a feeling of separation. You know, it's kind of like I wasn't sad. I was just it was sort of funny. In fact, there were a whole lot of hippies in the college who I was friends with, and when they introduced Tina, Tina loved it. Tina loved it. When they introduced Tina, they all went, yeah, they all cheered from the stands, you know, for the hippie. But she was just a freshman, and she came in, and people really didn't know what was inside her. They just saw her as the, you know, pretty cheerleader type from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Um, and we dated the whole way through college. I'm sure with all the football players wondering why.
Well,
And
I'm
to this day,
surprised.
we're still friends.
As a freshman, she was the candidate for homecoming queen. That's pretty
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Seniors and juniors. She didn't make it though, I guess, that time.
Well, wait a minute. No, we would have had to be dating for a little while. So she might have been a sophomore. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember.
Now, had you dated at all at Exeter, even though there weren't any girls in the school? Did you have any
Yeah,
social?
there's a story there. We had required church at Exeter. And so I went to the Congregational Church. Um, and because there were so many boys at the academy who had to go to church, the girls would go to church too. So we were all in a youth group, and there were two girls who also came to the youth group. And they told me later they came to meet boys from Phillips Exeter.
Smart.
One of them met me and found out that I wasn't really from Phillips Exeter, I was from town. And she lived out on Hampton Falls Road. Her name was Karen. And she's passed away now, but we remained friends our whole life too.
Hmm.
And my wife loved her. You know, she was a really nice person. Um, but she lived on Hampton Falls Road, and the only person I knew on Hampton Falls Road was the man who owned the bank that my father was executive vice president of. So I thought she must be really rich.
Uh-huh.
I said, "Oh, my father works for Hervey Kent." Hervey Kent was the rich man out on Hampton Falls Road. So she figured my father was probably like the gardener, not the executive vice president of a bank. And when I got out to her house, her family owned a campground and they worked with their hands out in the campground all day long, you know. So we had this kind of mismatch of expectation when she said, I live on Hampton Falls Road, and I said, my father works for Herbie Kent. Anyway, um, it was kind of ironic that we only met because, I mean, we lived in the same town essentially, but we only met because she went to the church to meet someone from out of town. And when I went away to college, I came back as a freshman because she was a senior and was going to be the, again, another queen candidate. She became the queen of her high school prom,
Uh-huh.
and I was her escort. So I was, even though I didn't go to Winnacunnet High School in Hampton, and I wasn't even in high school anymore, I was in college. I was the king of the Winnacunnet High
Oh,
School
wow.
prom. And it was back in the days of, remember, you'd have like a practically a crown made out of construction paper, and you'd sit on chairs with a chicken wire and crepe paper decorations behind you and so on.
Oh,
It was
fast
it made the newspaper. So I have a history here of being the escort. I never put
royalty.
two and two together, but yeah,
All right. So,
unexpected, not really earned.
um, back in Boston, because you were in Boston right after I left. I was there 65 to 69. Sounds like you got there in the early 70s. And I used to, I was a member of the Unitarian Church at Harvard Square to escape the boring medical school to get some intellectual stimulation. So I know what Boston was brewing. I missed Woodstock. I didn't even know what it was because med school was so insulated. But I knew all this was brewing, and I went off to San Francisco. But you were right there in the thick of that whole, well, the Vietnam War. What involvement did you have in, I'm assuming, against the war? Uh, talk about that.
Yeah, I was somewhat on the periphery of that. I um, would go to the marches, but remember my father was an Air Force lieutenant
Yeah,
colonel, and
yeah.
I even joined ROTC my first year at Lawrence. I didn't do the second year, but I did a year of ROTC. Um, so the way I handled the peace marches was that I would go with my camera and I'd be walking along the side taking pictures of it, recording it, and so on. But I didn't have to commit to, marching in it or resisting it. I wanted to be there, but I didn't quite know how I fit in.
Hmm. There's so many different sides of you. This is fascinating. I'm trying to come up with some questions to integrate it, but it's you're definitely the Renaissance man in the uh, unfolding of the whole new age back there in the 70s. Uh, anything else that you can think of while you were in Boston or the area?
Um, well, of course, how did I get into wellness? It was through yoga.
Uh-huh.
By being a yoga teacher, I would be asked to teach at conferences like the Northfield Conference in Western Massachusetts. Um, I was their yoga teacher, and so I met a whole lot of other people who were interested in wellness. And someone had read Don Ardell's High Level Wellness and was teaching a wellness workshop at the Northfield Conference. The Boston Women's Health Collective, were writing Our Bodies Ourselves
Oh, yeah.
and conducting workshops at the conference. And I was there as the yoga teacher. So I really got to get integrated into the wellness movement that way.
So Ardell's book came out, I think, 77. So we're talking later 70s. Uh,
It really didn't come out any sooner than that.
no,
Huh.
it was his PhD thesis. But so anything more mid 70s, like we had the fuel crisis and huge turmoil where I was in Baltimore at that point at Hopkins, and everything turned upside down with and Jimmy Carter gets elected, and uh, what else can you think? Well, after the divinity school, that was what, 2 years?
I did it over a period of about 4 years. I
Uh-huh.
took a year off to go to Sarasota, Florida, to be assistant to the dean of New College.
Oh, what was
And
that?
and I went to school part-time for a couple of years because I was so busy with magic and youth ministry and all of that. So it took me quite a while to do my 2 years.
Yeah, well, tell me about the Florida connection. This is, yeah.
Um, Probably one influence to go into the ministry was that we had a youth minister at that Exeter church who came up from Boston, from Andover Newton Theological School, and his name was Dave Ebert. Um, I was 16, he was 26. We sort of looked up to him. He was a wonderful guy. I mean, he organized things like um, the all male um, 10 days in the wilderness, climbing the White Mountains and canoeing down the Saco River, taking us away from society and getting into nature and, not, I mean, he was really spiritual. There wasn't much Bible beating, it was really communing with God through nature. And we respected him and liked him a lot. Well, there's another conference called WINE, Northern New England School of Religious Education, which meets on Lake Winnipesaukee, which I've also gone to every year most of my life. And he introduced me to that. And one summer we were there for the week, and he said, "I'm going to be dean of a new college. Would you like to come down and be the assistant dean?" I said, "What?"
Wow.
And I said, "I'm in school. Well, you can take a year off." So I did, just like that. I mean, we were talking in the first week of August, and in September I was down in Sarasota to have the experience of working in a college.
Now, there was a new college in San Francisco. Were they related?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And the new college in Sarasota is the one that's been taken over by the governor and turned from liberal to conservative overnight.
Interesting. So what was that like being an assistant dean? And that's a whole new experience.
Well, I wasn't much older than the college students. Um, it was it was more than I mean, I wasn't ready for it. Fortunately, Dave was there to guide me, but mm, it was fun. It was fun. I was in charge of the sailboats and recreation, and it was fun. I had some very interesting experiences in Sarasota. I was since I was a yoga teacher, I um, was brought on a TV show to teach yoga by Christine Chubbuck. She took my yoga class regularly. I had some concerns about her. She was the reporter who committed suicide on live TV.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
I don't know about this. And I'm sure
yeah,
most viewers.
which had a real effect on me.
Yeah.
Um, because I thought, gee, I was her yoga teacher, but I was so caught up in her sort of superior position to mine, being a little older, being a newscaster, she was in charge. So I probably didn't challenge her as a yoga teacher as much as I might have if I saw any red flags. So I learned something about making assumptions, not making assumptions.
What
That was
was,
pretty that was pretty rough when that happened.
well, I don't know anything about it, and I'm sure most of the viewers wouldn't either. What
There's
happened?
a movie. There is a movie about her. I forget the name of it. Something like Christine. There's a movie about it. She was trying to get the station to do less violent news and do more human interest stories, and was frustrated.
Strange way to go about it. So
Yeah.
how did she
Oh, yeah.
kill herself?
With a gun on
On
live.
live? Wow.
But when
I'm
you asked about Sarasota, that was a major event for me to
yeah.
have a yoga student do that. It to this day, I ask myself, when a friend is in trouble, or when an entire church is in trouble that I've served in the past, what could I have done differently?
Hmm.
Or an entire nation's in trouble that
Yeah.
where where I've preached and spoken on wellness for decades, and I guess people weren't listening.
They
What
weren't
what could I have
listening,
done
huh?
differently?
Why weren't
What?
they listening? Oh, I'm still kind of recovering from this story. Um, but anyway,
Well, you asked about Sarasota. There were other influences. I met Maximilio Truzzi in Sarasota because it was the home of the Ringling Brothers Circus, the winter home, and his father had been a premier juggler in the Ringling Brothers Circus, Maximilio Truzzi. So Marcello knew everyone. Um, he had written his um, PhD dissertation on this in sociology, on the sociology of church of circus families, and he uh, was a professor at New College, where I was assistant to the dean. So we got pretty close, and we both belonged to a magician society in Sarasota, which had a lot of people because it's where a lot of people go to retire. But he taught me a lot. He could literally pick up the phone and talk with people who wouldn't talk with each other. He could pick up the phone and talk with Uri Geller, Kreskin, Randy, Anton Zandor LaVey, the head of the Satanic Church, um, another woman who was a witch, you name it. He was talking to these people. He just asked them a question anytime and they would call him. So I got to rub shoulders, in a sense, with all those, learn something about all those people. Um, so Sarasota wasn't just about being assistant to the dean. It was a very interesting city to be living in 1974, 75.
yeah, wow.
I taught a lot of yoga classes there.
Hmm. So then you went back to Boston,
Yeah.
finished your degree.
Mhm.
Uh,
Decided not to become a minister at that time, and to just see how far I could go with magic.
so you're still performing at the club?
No. What club? No. That was a brief period.
Oh, okay. And did they ever put your name on the marquee or did you
Yeah,
present?
they did. Yeah, they did. I'm going
And
to take a break. I'll be right back. Do you pause the recording?
I shall pause it. So we're back, and you're back in Boston. We're in the mid 70s. You haven't yet read, or you probably about the time you would have found Ardell's book.
Mm-hmm.
Which also led to my second wife because she read it in Australia. That book had quite an influence around the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
how did you happen to find the book?
Going to the Northfield conference, someone had written it, had read it, and was teaching it. I mean, they were in a therapeutic field, so they knew how to teach from the book.
Mhm. Interesting.
And
Um,
then when I went to the National Wellness Conference and met Don Ardell and went back to these people, they said, "You met Don Ardell?" Oh yes. Oh yes. I think if we're short on time, I want to skip ahead to 1983, because it has a lot to do with being part of the wellness movement. You
yeah.
know, was wellness. But what happened was I did everything I could with magic in Boston. Broke up with my girlfriend at the time. I had toured all the Air Force bases in the United States with a full evening magic show, 3 assistants. I had done a lot with
Wow.
magic. Yeah. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go to Los Angeles and see what I can do with magic. So I moved to Los Angeles um, and tried to make it as a big time magician. Well, exactly a year and a half after I moved, I contracted testicular cancer. I was really successful. I was performing, in Lake Tahoe, Harrah's Hotel, and on national TV. But cruise ships in the Caribbean, I was doing all of that. But the testicular cancer made me wonder if my lifestyle might be too stressful. And I read the Simonson's book, Getting Well Again,
Oh
in
yeah.
which they say that very often people will have, and I knew about books like that. Um, they'll have um, an onset of cancer 6 to 18 months after a stressful event in their life. And if I were to take the Holmes scale of stress, I would have been off the map because I broke up with the girlfriend, lived in a different city, working for a different amount of money, working for different people, sleeping in a different bed, all the questions I asked.
Hmm.
Yes to all of them. So when I had the surgery and the radiation at Mass General, I also had a magic show at University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. And Fred Leifgren came up to me after the show. It was for the students and said, we'd like to have you perform at the wellness conference. I go, what's a wellness conference? And he said, well, come back in July and you'll see. So I did my first magic show at the National Wellness Conference around 1984, probably. And I thought, well, this is a good way for me to get my foot in the door. So in addition to the magic show, can I also lead a workshop? Well, what will it be on? Well, I have been exploring cultism, how people get fooled the same way a magician fools an audience. And so I did a workshop on cultism, mind control and the cults at the National Wellness Conference the same year that I performed magic for the first time. And I remember the way I would do it is I would do some mind reading, really impress people, give no disclaimer, just be able to read minds and say, I have a workshop on this that costs $99. And if enough people are interested, I'll stay and offer it. And people are opening up their purses, getting out their checkbooks. Well, the executive director of the wellness conference that year, this is my first year there, he stormed out of the room and went down the hallways saying, who got this guy? What's this guy doing here? And then what happens is I expose it all. I say, look, there's no workshop, but look at how quickly we hope that we'll get answers from someone outside. And everyone went like that. But it was very effective to worry people terribly for a while at the beginning. In a sense, I create a sense of cultism and then break it down. Uh, so for several years, for quite a few years, um, I had more people coming to my show and to my workshop than you could imagine, packed out. I mean, I remember Don Ardell one year finding out that his workshop was going to be the same time as mine, and he said, "I can't have that. Everyone's going to be at Bob Phelps."
Yeah.
He had to change. You know, it really worked for a while, and I thought that I was teaching self-responsibility. Your health is up to you. Don't look outside for answers. Don't think that someone else has all the answers. Don't depend on the medical system and don't depend on, you know, being cured by a doctor afterwards after you get sick. It's about self-responsibility. I used magic to make the points. And I thought that when I became a really good speaker on wellness, I wouldn't need the magic anymore. I would also have slides and a pointer like everyone else. And people said, no, no, keep the magic. And I went, really? Okay. So that's where the model sort of evolved of one night Patch Adams would do his clowning act with a wellness message, and another night I would do my magic act with a wellness message. But it came from the coincidence of doing a magic show for the students at University of Wisconsin Stevens Point the same year that I had the cancer and was questioning cruise ship and nightclub life.
Mhm.
And the way I put it is I went from the fringe benefits of my work being that I get free drinks at the bar at 1 in the morning when I get off work, or I go to a college to speak on wellness at noon and they say, here's a pass to our health club this afternoon if you want to go. So I changed my entire lifestyle by switching from magician primarily to wellness magician. And I'm so glad I did.
So yeah, I remember one of those early shows. I'm not sure which year it was. I was in Costa Rica till '84, and I remember I was back for a couple of them in the early '80s. But now you've moved to LA. Prior to
Mhm.
that, so you came out from LA, and now
I would
uh,
come out every year from LA to do the wellness conference.
so what were you if you're getting out of the crazy entertainer life and so forth in LA, what were you doing the rest of the year?
Oh, I was still an entertainer, but I was now doing more wellness presentations than pure magic shows.
For what kind of venues or at,
Um, Hospitals would have me come in and do a performance open to the whole community,
oh,
introducing the wellness concept. Um, Colleges would have me come for, wellness day or whatever. Other wellness conferences. Um, 6 times to Australia for the wellness conferences there. Teachers conferences in Canada. High schools, alcohol and other drug awareness assemblies at high schools all over the country and Canada.
uh-huh.
Don't be fooled, take charge of your life.
Was that the title of your show?
No, but that was
Slogan?
slogan, yeah.
Well, I think we met up in Australia once in Queensland for some reason. Now I was very
I
lucky.
remember I remember you leading workshops at the wellness conference in Stevens Point.
Yeah, now in Australia, I had married an Australian at that point, and we'd come over here for visits, and I think that's how I overlapped with you. But I hadn't been invited to the conferences. Was Bob Boyd doing them at that point, or who?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
I didn't meet Bob until later, and um, where were they in Brisbane?
You talking about the conferences that I did in Australia?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, Grant Donovan
right.
put those on. It was
Oh,
for the Department of Recreation in Australia.
that was before Bob started his the Australian National Wellness.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So
It was in
fascinating.
the 80s. It was in the 80s.
So moving on to the 90s, how did things evolve?
Um, I I started doing more with magic again, and especially mind reading. And so, yeah, I would do half and half wellness presentations and straight magic performances. But the type of mind reading I was doing was convincing, and I wrote the book Easily Fooled and talked a little bit about how it's done, so that I ended up on a lot of national TV shows, like twice on Phil Donahue, twice on Lisa, Fight Back with David Horowitz, you name it. I just did a whole bunch of daytime talk shows mostly with mind reading and a little bit of how it's done and how we can be fooled in real life. How how we can be swayed by the magician's choice. Heads I heads I win, tails you lose. I'm not quite sure people understand that concept yet. It
So,
feels like a lot of blowing in the wind, to have tried to educate people about not being
yeah,
fooled by phony promises.
yeah, for sure. Now, are you still in Los Angeles during the 90s or
Yes. Well, wait a minute. No, right about then I moved to Minneapolis.
I was going to say that's where I encountered you there.
Yeah.
Um, and relationships, you got married at some point?
Yes, I was married around 1984, right after the cancer experience. I decided to settle down, you know, change my life.
And
Um,
who did you meet and where and how? And
well, she was a woman I met in Los Angeles. She was from Minnesota, explains the move to
Mhm.
Minnesota. We got divorced around 1997. Um, kind of a midlife transition. It was right about that time that I also bought uh, a water torture cell that had been performed by Houdini, and decided to go back into magic as an escape artist. And I just, some men with their midlife crisis or transition uh,
Get a Corvette.
also get divorced, get the car, go bungee jumping in New Zealand. I mean, I decided to get paid for my adventure, and I bought a water torture cell, and just went completely. I just really went out there. I mean, it was like I was in my 50s and feeling like this was my last chance to make a big splash, pun intended. So it was, who's to say, what's good and what's bad? Right now, um, the mother of my children, my ex-wife, and my current wife, and I, with the kids, and now a granddaughter, all have Thanksgiving dinner together, all have Christmas together, open presents together under the tree. Um, the mother of my children and my wife are friendly, talk about the kids.
That's wonderful.
You
Yeah.
can heal. You can heal,
Mhm.
and you have to. I mean, it's important to heal. And I talked to so many people who are holding grudges, and uh, I just tell them it's going to take time, but it can happen. It might take 2 years before the healing begins, even.
So personal wellness, you're definitely practicing what you preached. And um, the move to Minneapolis, what was that like?
Um, well, Robin and I, my wife at the time, and I now had a 2-year-old daughter, and we're living in West Hollywood. And we said, at what age would we be comfortable with her saying, "I'm going out, I'll be back later"? And we realized there was no age living in Los Angeles that we'd be comfortable with that. So we realized we had to move. So we moved to Minneapolis. And it was centrally located. I had agents around the country who I did magic for and spoke for. And I sent them a map of the United States because, you should really be from Los Angeles if you're a magician, right?
Yeah,
I sent them a map with Minnesota highlighted, and I sent it out to them and said, centrally located to serve you better. And it's true that as a public speaker, it was very easy to fly to a
Tom,
gig or back from a gig
yeah.
from a place like Minneapolis or Dallas. So that's why a lot of speakers live in cities like that.
So you went through the midlife crisis and you didn't drown in the water torture thing. Did you actually perform with that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I had a close call with it. I didn't drown in it, but I had a close call.
Oh, was that on TV or in a
Yeah,
venue? Hmm.
yeah. No one knows I had a close call because we pretend that I have a close call in every performance.
Oh,
In fact, in every performance, it looks like I'm not going to go out, and the assistants sort of panic. But one time it was real. You can't tell the difference.
gosh.
But I didn't perform it live that much, but on TV, a lot of people saw it on TV, but live performances were limited. And once a guy said to me, "I saw you do the water torture cell." Oh, really? He said, "I saw you do it in person." Really? Where'd you see it? He said, "I saw it the time you almost didn't get out,"
Oh,
which means every time.
he didn't really
Oh,
get
we
it.
pretend every
Yeah.
time that I almost don't get out.
I
So
thought
that
maybe he
told
was
me
better.
nothing. He thought he saw it the one time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The fact is, there was one time that we weren't pretending.
And was that at a live performance or
Yeah. Yeah.
recorded? So what
It was
happened is,
live and recorded. It was live on TV.
uh-huh.
Hmm.
I probably can't ask any more secrets about that.
No, I
But
mean it was at Copley Plaza in Boston for a show called Impossible Escapes.
uh,
And it was a national TV special where, like half a dozen escape artists would all beat uh, Ripley's Believe It or Not record by having more escapes from more cities at the same time as ever before. So we all escaped at the same time, and it
oh,
was a TV special. But yeah, I couldn't get out. Unfortunately, I have people who I hire to perform the show who are highly skilled, and they each have a different skill. And I owe a lot to the guy who figured out what was wrong. It was a mechanical thing that was wrong, and he figured it out. And without that, I could have been in trouble.
wow.
But I also always have an assistant who knows CPR, and
Yeah.
but
So,
you see this like took over. It took over for a while. I mean, yeah, I'm in my 50s, no, my 40s, my 40s. I stopped doing it when I was 52. And I'm in my 40s, and I'm just saying, okay, this is one last grab at the brass ring. I'm going to buy the water torture cell, and
and then somewhere in there is when you decide to go back to the ministry, uh,
yeah,
late 50s or
um, when I was in my mid 50s, um, I don't remember exactly when it was, but George Herbert Walker Bush, father, was going to war in Iraq. Do you remember that?
yeah, the first
Desert
one.
Storm, all those.
Yeah.
And we hadn't gone to war like that in a while. I mean, it sort of was a throwback to Vietnam. It was like,
Hmm.
what world are we doing? And I remember walking by a TV set when Larry King was on, and he was talking to three religious leaders about religion in the war. And the three people he was talking to were Deepak Chopra, a TV evangelist, and a Catholic priest, who made the most sense of the three as far as I was concerned, but I'm not Catholic. And I looked and I said, where are my people? I'd gone to Harvard Divinity School and studied with Wilfred Cantwell Smith and Bill Rogers and Harvey Cox and Gordon Kaufman and Richard Niebuhr. And, where are my people? How come when we turn to theology for answers, we get a TV evangelist, Deepak Chopra, and a Catholic priest? And the Catholic priest was fine, but it's just one narrow view. Deepak Chopra, don't get me started about him, and the TV evangelists don't get me started about them. So I felt a tug like this, and it wasn't uh, egocentric. Sometimes people feel called because they have something to offer. It wasn't like, I feel called to jump in here. I feel called. It wasn't that. There was no personalization. It was just this. a
Mhm.
tug. And every time I saw references to religion and politics, I just said, "Oh my gosh, where are the people that I studied with?" And I realized, hey, you're in your mid 50s, maybe you're one of the people. I mean, it's like, are you still, didn't you hear your lectures about not waiting for someone else to come along and save you? So the tug led to entering the ministry, and I was truly called to the ministry, whereas I wasn't when I was younger. When I was in divinity school, I wasn't called, but this time I was called. And a funny story, as I'm feeling the tug and listening to theologians on TV talk about the war, uh, my parents were in a retirement community in New Hampshire, and I got a phone call, and they said, "Bob, we just want to tell you we had dinner last night with a retired minister um, at dinner, and we said, oh, our son had thought about retiring into the ministry someday. He went to seminary, and this minister said, tell him to do it now." So I'm like, how many times is the call to ministry an actual phone call? And I found myself going with Melody to the local seminary and saying, so what would it take? What would I have to do to, pursue this? And I did a year of study here in Minnesota and went through the path to ordination, did clinical pastoral education, a summer internship in a hospital, did the whole route, and became ordained the day before my 60th birthday. Just squeezed it in my 50s. So there's another opportunity for me to help others if they're feeling, like in their 50s, what am I doing? Look, you can start, over,
Mhm.
you know. Um, it's inspirational, to know people who have done that. I'm starting over again. I'm 75, and I said I wouldn't take another pastorate, but I'm taking one. And so for 6 months, I'll be a pastor in New Hampshire. Um, and I said I wouldn't. But again, it's just right. It's just right. It's the perfect group of people. It's the perfect time. Their minister is leaving the same week that I'm heading back to New Hampshire. Um, everything's right about it. So again, you can say, "Oh, I'm never going to do this," and you'll surprise yourself.
Now, is this going to be in Peterborough or
No,
nearby?
in Derry. It's
So,
a town close to Boston, between Boston and Manchester.
uh-huh. So you'll commute from Peterborough or...
Yeah.
So you mentioned Melody. When did she show up on the scene and become your wife?
Well, I had been divorced and dating. Um, but there was a group of women in Minneapolis who were all interested in spiritual matters. They were the women who would go together to the Women's Wellness Weekend, to go hear the psychic, Echo Bodine, the psychic. They'd go to the drumming circle. They would go to the community church that had a different minister every Sunday, the unity type church.
Hmm.
Uh, the women who moved around together, and there were about 3 men who were in the group, and I became one of them. And so there was sort of an unwritten understanding that, of course, there was no hint of dating we were one of the girls. Um, and so I enjoyed traveling with these women and just hanging out with them and um, keeping everything on a friendly basis, except that at one party, one of them brought Melody. And as soon as I saw Melody, I thought, oh, this is going to be, this is different. Something's different about this. I don't know if I could follow the rules, uh, but I'll try. And for a year and a half, Melody and I were just friends. But then she called and left a message for me. And again, we're both single, but not dating anyone at the time. And said, would you like, I feel like going out to dinner, and getting out of town. And I'm listening to the message. I think she means just the two of us, not the whole group. I think she means just the two of us. And we've been together ever since that one date.
Did you stay on in the group then, or
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The group came to the wedding and
you became the couple in the group? Fascinating.
yeah, we broke the rules.
Just to back up a bit, you have a daughter with Robin.
Yes. Oh, and I have to say about relationships, I think it's really useful to have been friends for a year and a half before you consider dating. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked to each other about everything, so there were no illusions. If we dated someone else, we talked about that. I mean, we
Uh-huh.
talked about it. So that was really good to marry someone who was a friend
Hmm.
instead of the way it happens now. It's like match.com and you go have coffee and immediately you're thinking, is this the one? Oh, that's crazy.
Uh-huh.
So Robin and I have a daughter and a son. And now my daughter has a daughter. So we have a 2-year-old granddaughter. And when I say we, Melody and I consider her our granddaughter too. And
Uh-huh.
the granddaughter has, five grandparents.
And they're all in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And the son, is he?
He's not married, but he has a girlfriend and they're very serious. And, their relationship has gone through COVID. So they, any plans they might have had have been on hold, so to speak. It's been a tough time to be in a relationship, I think,
And are
you
they
know,
near,
starting a relationship.
are they in the area or far away?
They're right here in the area.
Hmm.
We see them too.
Wow, where are we?
Well, we're considering doing part two another evening if you want, because I'm pretty tired of my life.
Yeah,
I've
well,
heard. Thanks
I,
for your questions, but that's the gist of it.
well, I think we're at a wrap-up point. You've had several churches. I remember visiting you in Portsmouth, or the little town just south of there. What was the name of that?
Greenland.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
such a strange
And these
name.
days, yeah, these days, if someone says they're a pastor, you really need to ask which kind, because my theology is progressive. I mean, I have officiated a same-sex wedding, for example, and my primary interest is in social justice, not morality, uh,
Hmm.
uh, ethics, um, and so it's hard now to say you're a pastor because people have no idea. They just, you could be one of two extremes.
Hmm. Well, summing it up in a few final words, uh, what would you make of your wellness career, and what would you like to pass on to future generations, assuming this gets out there and has some lifespan?
Hmm. Be careful what you're interested in when you're 8. It may bear fruit. Pay
Well,
attention. Pay attention to what you're interested in when you're 8 and 9 and up to 12, because if you're going to be authentic, there may be a reason that you are keenly interested in that when you were young.
hmm. Well, you've up to now had such a fascinating life, and I assume you're going to have a lot more of it. And I'm so glad to have reconnected again in the last few years, and
Yes, come on up and visit again.
yeah, well, hopefully, I'm meeting with the Northfield people tomorrow, and we'll see if that happens. So, um, thank you again, Bob. This has been great. Appreciate so much what you've done for the field, and glad to bring you into this collection of uh, pioneers. So I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you for your inspiration. We refer to the wellness workbook. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
And it and we're quite aligned with your views as expressed in that book. It embraces spirituality as well as, the physical.
yeah. Well, it's still in print, third edition. The sales are petering out, but they haven't taken it off the market yet. So
Mhm.
thanks again, Bob. I'm going to stop the recording.